Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections along with the daily practice questions. We'll also be doing the mains validation for the upcoming mains examination along with the prelims pointers. In the analysis part, we'll first talk about the untapped potential of tourism and hospitality sector in the country, the associated challenges and the way forward. Then in the second article, we'll talk about the key provisions of the draft National Health Research Policy, the challenges in its implementation and the way forward. Then in the prelims pointers section, we'll talk about 4 important topics for the upcoming UPSC 2027 prelims examination along with the validation. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is about tourism and hospitality, India's growth multiplier. Now, India is a country which has huge diversity. Let's talk about the geographical diversity which we have in terms of the mountain areas, in terms of the plains, in terms of the coastal areas, in terms of the islands. For example, we have Sundarbans. Or let's talk about the social diversity which we have in terms of the varied culture, for example, the tribal culture, in terms of the varied forms of music, in terms of cuisines. Now, this gives India a unique position, which rarely any other country enjoys. See, what you'll have to understand is that there are very few countries in the world which have that much kind of diversity which India has. But still, they have been able to exploit, or they have been able to scale the tourism and the hospitality sector to great levels. Therefore, this gives India a unique opportunity. It gives India that potential, and we need to exploit that potential. Why this is important is for the reason that tourism and hospitality sector not only has direct benefits, the benefits which basically accrue to the people who are directly involved in the sector, but also it has a lot of indirect benefits in terms of providing the employment opportunities, various sources of incomes, and therefore it basically promotes the idea of inclusive growth. For example, it gives opportunity to lot of rural population, the women empowerment, right? So therefore, it's a very, very important sector. We have one of the columns which has been published in the Indian Express, where the chairman of a federation, Faith, he talks about a lot of measures which the government should take in order to basically boost this particular sector. What we'll be doing today is we'll be exploring and we'll try to have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the overall sector. Any question, if it comes from this particular domain, you'll be able to write a very good answer. We'll talk about the particular sector. We'll talk about various types of tourism which India has. We'll talk about the key challenges involved. We'll talk about the changes which India is witnessing, and we'll also talk about the way forward. It's going to be a very comprehensive discussion. With GS3 Indian economy. Before I start the discussion, there's one very important point. I'm really happy. I really appreciate the efforts of all those who are writing answers with respect to the analyst. But I've seen that many of you are also they're just writing the answers of the first topic or the second topic. Please try to write the answers of both the topics. For example, in today's discussion, both the topics are very, very important from the mains perspective. That is really going to help you, right? So without any waste of time, let's start with the discussion. Now, let's first try to understand the difference between the words tourism and hospitality, because there is a lot of confusion among the students of what really these words are all about. If we talk about tourism, it basically means the movement of people outside their usual place of residence for leisure, for business, for pilgrimage, or for example for medical treatment, or for example for adventure, or for example conferences, right? So it is basically referring to the movement of people from their usual place of residence to the other places for various reasons. Then we have hospitality. This basically refers to the services offered to the tourists. For example, in terms of the hotels, for example, in terms of the resorts, the restaurants, for example, in terms of the travel assistance, in terms of the homestays, right? So the services which are offered to the tourists are basically in the category of hospitality. And one thing which is very important, a concept which you should always remember, tourism creates the demand while hospitality fulfills that demand. So the services, tourism is basically the movement of the people, and all the services which are involved that form the part and parcel of the hospitality aspect. Now, why tourism is important for a country like India? See, if we talk about tourism sector and the hospitality sector combined, it has one of the highest multiplier effects in any economy. What do we mean by multiplier effects? What I'm trying to convey is that it is not just benefiting the people who are involved in the sector. Rather, it is also benefiting a lot other people who are not directly linked with this particular sector, right? For example, it basically gives a boost to the incomes of the people, it promotes the employment, it generates the foreign exchange, right? It promotes the cultural diplomacy. So it has a lot of multiplier effects, right? Creates a chain reaction of the economic activities, various economic activities. For example, let's say if you have one particular person traveling from Delhi to, let's say, Dalhousie or to any of the other places, then what that would basically make is that would open opportunities for various other people. For example, in terms of the taxi operators, in terms of the street vendors, in terms of the artisans, in terms of the handicraftsmen, right? So it is giving employment opportunity and it is promoting an inclusive growth, specifically with respect to the women empowerment, right? So therefore, it creates a chain reaction of economic activities. Very, very important. Now, transport, we have different sectors, aviation, right? If we talk about the sectors, which all sectors would it give impetus? It would basically indirectly give a force to other sectors. For example, aviation, for example, in terms of transport, in terms of the hotels, in terms of the construction activity, right? So these are all the sectors which would be benefited with respect to the tourism. If there is a development of tourism, definitely all these sectors would be benefited. Now, what is the current status of tourism in India? Let's refer the original authentic sources, and that is the economic survey of this year, which very clearly says, as per the estimates of the Ministry of Tourism, in financial year 24, travel and tourism contributed almost 5.22% to the GDP. So this is not a small number, 5.22% to the GDP. And please understand, this is a direct contribution. We are not incorporating the indirect contribution which it has. Got it? Close to the pre-pandemic levels, while supporting an estimated 8.46 crore direct and indirect jobs. Now, this is the second highest number after the agriculture and the construction sector. So can you just imagine the importance of this particular sector? And therefore, there's a very high probability of a question coming from this particular area. Or about 13.3% of the total employment in the overall economy. 13.3% of the total employment. Out of the total employment, 13.3% with respect to the employment opportunities. So very, very important sector. What is the current status of tourism in India? If we talk about the contribution to GDP, it is almost 5.5 to 7% through various sources. Niti Aayog, the economic survey, gives a number as 5 to 7%. But many other sources reveal that it can be much higher. It can be to the tune of almost 9% because there are other sectors also involved. For example, the World Travel and Tourism Council estimates the multiplier effects on the other sector. For example, in the transport sector, we have various taxi operators. For example, in terms of the artisans, in terms of the handicraftsmen, in terms of the construction sector, in terms of the aviation, it gives a boost to the aviation sector. It gives a boost to the railways, the road and everything. So it has a multiplier effect. And therefore, the overall contribution to the GDP can be much higher, more than that of 5%. Employment generation, around 9% of the total employment. 1 out of 10% is employed in tourism and the hospitality sector. So very, very important. And it has multiple indirect jobs, already told. We have, for example, street vendors, we have the taxi operators, we have the local people, we have the women having the small self-help groups. They basically prepare or manufacture these small items and they sell those items to the tourists, right? So therefore, it also gives a kind of an inclusive growth. Okay. Even for semi-skilled and unskilled workers. Now, this is very, very important to consider. In a country like India, where people don't have the requisite skills. See, first of all, we don't have the requisite skill. There is a large portion of the population which does not have adequate skills with it. Right? And the people who have the skill, they are not having that kind of skill which is required for the current times or the future skills, right? The emerging technologies. So therefore, this particular sector is a sector which even gives opportunity to those people who are not that skilled. As I told you, for example, let's say a simple food eatery shop, a street vendor selling a simple food item, for example, momos or something. So it gives opportunity to semi-skilled and unskilled workers. Or for example, let's say a driver, right? Foreign exchange earnings, we have a lot of spending by the foreign tourists who come to India, right? For shopping, for buying various things, for staying in the hotels. So this particular thing, it is basically an invisible export. Use these words in our answers. Tourism acts as invisible export earning. It gives the earning through the invisible exports, generates valuable forex, and ultimately what this does is it improves the current account balance. It improves the forex reserves. It provides that external stability. right? Especially during the times of crisis, especially for a country like India, which is dependent on a lot of these energy supplies. So it needs a lot of foreign exchange, right? Domestic tourism. Now, this is the biggest asset which India has. In the financial year 24 itself, almost 2.9 billion people basically registered or were a part of the domestic tourism. Those Indian people who basically travel to different places, 2.9 billion in financial year 24. And this is stable and this is less vulnerable to the global crisis. See, we have a lot of crisis going on in the West Asia. So what Prime Minister Modi has said, he has asked people to refrain, to not go to different places around the world, right? But he has not said, but on the other hand, what he has said is that people should basically travel to different places within the country itself, so that we give or we provide adequate money supply to the local people, and therefore it boosts the local economy, right? And exchange rate. That is, exchange rate volatility does not have that of effect on the domestic tourism. Now, what are the major segments of tourism in the country? We have the religious tourism, and this is the fastest growing segment. It would be definitely, for example, we have different places. We have Ayodhya, we have Kashi, we have Tirupati, we have Amritsar, we have Ajmer Sharif, right? Then we have medical tourism. India provides that aspect of skilled doctors and affordable healthcare. We have many of those services, those intensive and highly technical surgeries, which are there in the other countries, which are provided in the other countries at a much higher cost, at exorbitant rates. But in India, those are provided at much economical cost. And therefore, many of the countries, especially the neighboring countries, they come to India to access those healthcare facilities. Just have a look at this. Medical tourist arrivals increased from about 1.12 lakh in 2009 to over 6 lakh during 2022-24, implying a compound annual growth rate of around 12.4%, significantly above the overall inbound tourism growth of 4.5% for the corresponding period. So the growth of medical tourism is much higher than that of the average tourism growth. And this talks about the kind of robust facilities which India has developed. For example, we have the Apollo hospitals, we have the Fortis healthcare, right? And they are providing comparatively to the prices which are being charged in the other countries, they are charging much less. And we have basically emerged a key destination as far as the organ transplantation is concerned, as far as the cardiac care is concerned, as far as the orthopedics is concerned, or as far as, let's say, the IVF treatment is concerned. So these are the major centers, right? And we have, for example, Delhi, we have Gurgaon, we have the other places, we have the Medanta, for example. Then we have wellness tourism. We have, for example, the yoga, Ayurveda, naturopathy, we have meditation. Kerala has emerged as a global destination for the wellness tourism. Next, we have ecotourism. Now, the focus in the ecotourism is on biodiversity conservation in terms of wildlife sightseeing. We have many of the places, for example, we have Kaziranga, we have Periyar National Park, right? Then we have the adventure tourism, we have mountaineering, we have the river rafting, we have the scuba diving, we have the skiing, right? Then we have rural tourism. It supports the local communities. We have the women self-help groups which are involved in this. They are manufacturing the local handicrafts, right? We have the local crafts. So this is it's being given a boost. Then we have MICE. What it means is the meetings, incentives, the conferences and exhibition. So it's a high value tourism. We have many of the meetings which take place globally. And these centers, for example, we have the India Habitat Center. We have Bharat Mandapam, right? So these are the convention centers where these events take place. And these are high value tourism aspect, right? Then we have cruise tourism. Now, this is something which is still underdeveloped in a country like India. You must be aware of the Cordelia cruises in India, right? So we have potential in different places. We have, for example, the coastal circuits. We have in Mumbai, we have in Kochi. So that can be exploited. So this is what you'll have to understand. Now, what are the emerging trends in tourism and hospitality sector? There are some structural transformation which are being witnessed. The very first is that now tourism is basically moving from the metropolitan cities to the smaller places, to the tier 2 and 3 cities. Now, you have to tell me the population range with respect to tier 2 and tier 3 cities, including the tier 1 cities. And also tell me that on what basis we come up with this particular thing, which institution has provided this particular tier 1, 2, 3 classification. Historically, tourism has been concentrated in few places, for example, in Delhi, Jaipur, Goa, Mumbai. Now it is shifting to tier 2 and 3 cities. For example, we have Kashi, we have Banaras, we have Tirupati, we have Jagannath Puri, we have Amritsar, we have all these small places, Ayodhya, for example. So now tourism is shifting to the other locations. And this, in one way or the other, it provides for the inclusive growth. ठीक है, promotes the balanced regional development. Then infrastructure led tourism. What you'll have to understand is that infrastructure creation acts, or it provides the basis for tourism competitiveness. If the infrastructure of a place is robust, definitely the tourism would be competitive in that particular location. For example, more the construction of airports takes place, or the expressways, or the convention centers, more would be the demand of the tourism aspect. We have, for example, Prime Minister has flagged off many of the Vande Bharat train, we have Chenab rail bridge, we have the Jewar airport. So that is what you'll have to understand. PM or the government has come up with the Gati Shakti program, right? Or all these Bharat Mala, Sagar Mala. So this is in one way or the other. This is boosting the tourism aspect. Then rise of institutional investments. What we have been observing is that there has been a significant rise in the capital as far as the tourism sector is concerned. And it is attracting the sovereign wealth funds, the pension funds, the private equity, the real estate investment trusts, the listed hotel companies. Many of the hotels companies are now listed. And therefore, what it tells us is that this sector is getting access to institutional finances, and therefore it is not just a sector which is having a very small importance. Rather, it is having a very big importance and contributing great to the overall economy. Then airport centric development. Now this is also again a kind of a new paradigm which we are emerging, which we are witnessing. Airports are actually coming as the economic ecosystems. The development or the tourism centers are coming around the airport at different places. For example, the warehouses, the convention centers, we have many of the cargos, we have many of these hotels and restaurants which are being constructed near the airports. Let's talk about the Delhi Aerocity. Let's talk about the Bengaluru Airport City, right? So all these places are around the airport itself. Then experience economy. What we are witnessing is now people are not just going to different places just for the sake of enjoying the destination. Rather, they want to experience that. For example, the homestays, the food trails, the heritage walks. For example, the vineyards, we have the Sola vineyards in Nasik. Or let's talk about the coffee plantations, the tea plantations, which people really want to experience, right? Now, what have been the government initiative? We have had the Swadesh Darshan 2.0. Initially, we had Swadesh Darshan, which basically talked about coming up with various circuits, Buddhist circuit and other circuits. The very objective of Swadesh Darshan 2.0 is to promote sustainable tourism, and also have the destination-based planning. Destination-centric planning, right? Then we have Prasad scheme, which basically stands for the pilgrimage, rejuvenation, and the spiritual and heritage augmentation drive. So this basically focuses on the development of spiritual cities, right? Then we have Dekho Apna Desh, again promotes the domestic tourism. Then we have Incredible India campaign. This provides the international branding to the tourism sector in India, right? Also helps in the marketing. Then we have Udan scheme for the regional connectivity at different places, right? Then we have Bharat Gaurav tourist trains in terms of the Buddhist circuit, the Ramayana circuit. Then we have the e-visa, which basically tries to make sure that it is easier for people from different countries to come and visit India, right? So it simplifies the overall process. Then we have PM Gati Shakti, overall integrated planning and development, right? Integrated development takes place across various sectors. Then we have Cruise Bharat Mission in order to develop the untapped potential which we have with respect to the cruise aspect, right? Now, what are the major challenges? And if you just look at the Union Budget 27, it has a lot of schemes, it has a lot of things with respect to the tourism aspect. Development of Buddhist circuits in the northeastern region, hosts the first ever global Big Cat Summit. This can be used as an example, as an ancillary point in your answers. Setting up the National Institute of Hospitality, National Destination Digital Knowledge, pilot scheme for upskilling 10,000 guides. This is also very, very important. To develop ecologically sustainable mountain trails, turtle trails, again walks, right? Bird watching trails, develop 15 archaeological sites. Then we have the 5 regional medical hubs. So these are the important things which have been announced in the budget. What are the challenges? The very first is infrastructure deficit. Even though we have worked a lot in terms of Bharat Mala, in terms of expressways, in terms of the Gati Shakti, but still we lack as far as the connectivity is concerned. There is still a lack of roads, airports, toilets, digital connectivity is missing. So you go to the mountain areas, you will find that there is no mobile network, right? So this aspect has to be looked into. Last mile connectivity. Now, for let's say if I have to visit one particular center, right? So I'll have to go to a nearby town A. And from A, the connectivity is very, very poor. from this particular town B. If I have to visit the place B from Delhi, I'll have to go to a nearby town A, which has a good connectivity, direct connectivity, but it has very poor connectivity with this particular town B. So this has to be enhanced. Then we have skill deficit. We don't have that kind of a professional cadre or a professional course with respect to, we have many of the obviously institutes providing the professional courses, but we have very less of the hospitality professionals. We have less people who are quite fluent in various languages, in different languages, French, Italian, or the other languages, right? Because we have many of the foreign tourists who come to India, and they would obviously want guides who have proficiency or influence in that in their own language. Then we have regulatory bottlenecks. If a particular entity wants to develop a hotel or a hotel chain, or for example, restaurant or resort, there are numerous regulatory approvals which are required, and they act as a hurdle. And this is a kind of a red tapeism which we have. And not just the normal approval process, but also the environmental clearances. The environmental clearances, especially those ecologically sensitive areas. Then we have high tax burden. We have a lot of GST which is being imposed on various hotel services. That has to be reduced. If you really want the lower middle income class to basically go and travel to different places, you'll have to reduce the tax burden, right? Tax rationalization has to take place. Then there are environmental concerns. We have the menace of single-use plastics. People go from Punjab, from Haryana, from Delhi, from UP to these places, and then basically leave that litter all around, the single-use plastics, the bottles over there, and that basically disturbs or it degrades the pristine environment which is there, right? Bottles, biodiversity loss, we have pollution, we have degradation of the coastal areas, of the beaches, of the rivers. Let's talk about Rishikesh, or let's talk about the other rivers. Okay? So it pollutes the very purity of those areas, the pristine ecosystems. Then over-tourism. Again, see, whenever the weekends come, we have people from these adjoining states of the hill states. They just plan a trip, and within 2 days they go, they visit, and they pollute and they come back. Not just in the North Indian part, also in the South India. For example, in Kerala or for example, in the other parts, around Nilgiris. So what you'll have to understand is that every place has a carrying capacity. And if you'll have people more than the carrying capacity, it would disturb the balance. And this would ultimately affect the ecological fragility of that particular region. It would affect the balance of that particular region. Let's talk about Shimla or Manali. And this also leads to a lot of congestion because we have big vehicles. We have Thars, we have Defenders, and all these vehicles going in and then creating traffic in these areas which have very narrow lanes in the mountain areas, right? And this also creates animosity. You must have seen that there have been a lot of fights between people from various states and the local people, because what ultimately happens is that there's a difference in the language, there's a difference in the culture, and therefore ultimately a lot of fights and animosity takes place. So again, it is not good for a country like India. Then we have climate change. What is happening because of climate change is that it is threatening the very Himalayan tourism, or let's say the coral bleaching is taking place. We have the glacier retreat which is taking place. So therefore this is not good. Then safety and security concern with respect to the women, with respect to disaster preparedness, with respect to the emergency healthcare facilities. So adequate facilities are not there with respect to the healthcare. Let's say if a person suffers from a cardiac arrest, or let's say if a person suffers from a grievous injury, serious injury, what would be the recourse? Okay, so this is what you'll have to understand. What should be the way forward? The very first is recognize tourism as a core economic infrastructure. Now, this is very important to understand. We just look at tourism and hospitality from that angle of leisure. That should be avoided. Tourism and hospitality has been given in some places the infrastructure. Please pay attention over here. Infrastructure status. But it has not been given the industry status. And that's what the author talks about in the article. Tourism and hospitality must be given the industry status so that they can access the institutional finances. They can access the borrowing. They can have the borrowing routes through the institutional finances. Then we have improved the physical connectivity, the last mile connectivity with respect to including the digital connectivity, right? Then we have developed the destination ecosystems, focus on holistic destination management, the waste management, the sanitation, the visitor amenities, that has to be focused on. Promote sustainable tourism, carrying capacity assessment. What we can do? We can have a kind of a voucher-based scheme. in specific hill areas like, for example, Shimla or Mussoorie or Manali, what we can do is, which are witnessing a kind of an over tourism over there. So there can be a website which can basically give the vouchers, and only on the basis of limited vouchers there has to be an entry in those particular areas. Encourage renewable energy, waste management, polluter pays, yes. So there has to be a fee imposed on the people with respect to, if the kind of pollution which the area is suffering from, the plastics and the other things. Liberalize the visa policies, expand the e-visa coverage. We have expanded the e-visa to few countries. Why not expand it to other countries so that people from the other countries find it easy to come and travel and visit in India? One more thing which you'll have to understand, one more concern is that the period of stay in India for the foreign tourists, it's quite low as compared to the other countries. When a person, let's say an American, is coming to visit India, he would have a lower stay, a low average time in India as compared to China. Why? Because there are issues with respect to the amenities, there are issues with respect to the guides, there are issues with respect to the safety. So that has to be focused on. Rationalize the taxation, rationalize the GST, and private participation is very, very important in this particular aspect, especially with respect to the development. Then strengthen the community participation. We should focus on the homestays more, not just the commercial big chain hotels. Rather, we should focus on homestays, local guides, and this would promote the balanced regional development. Then we have invest in the skills, the languages, the digital marketing, the branding, the hospitality management. We need to come up with more of the courses. For example, we have the Indian Institute of Tourism and Management. So more of courses at different places must be there. It should be incorporated in the curriculum, right? So that we have more of these people coming and joining and having that degree, having those aspects in a professional manner. Then we have leverage technology, deploy the artificial intelligence. We have the GIS, we have digital ticketing, AI-based tourism planning, or for example, the virtual tours. We have the virtual reality, we have the augmented reality. So these tours can be there at various museums, right? So this must be focused on. There is also one more value addition, which is basically the Niti Aayog report of 2026, which talks about, the topic is the unlocking growth in tourism and hospitality sector, says that tourism should be treated as a strategic growth sector, improving destination readiness, financing, ease of doing business, and sustainability. So this can also be mentioned in the answer. So what we are trying to say is that tourism is not just something which should be seen from a leisure aspect. Rather, it's a strategic pillar with respect to the employment, with respect to the overall income generation, with respect to the overall development, the inclusive growth, the balanced regional development, and it would constitute a major pillar in making India developed by 2047, Viksit Bharat by 2047. This particular sector is going to play a very, very important role. If small countries like France or Spain can basically emerge as tourism centers around the world, why cannot India? Right? So we should focus on a robust strategy so as to have a comprehensive improvement in the tourism and hospitality sector. Let's have a mains practice question, very, very important. Tourism and hospitality have emerged as the strategic drivers of economic growth, employment generation, and regional development in India. Discuss. Examine the challenges confronting the sector and suggest measures to unlock its full potential. So comprehensively, you'll have to talk about the first aspect, the drivers of economic growth, employment generation, and regional development. Then you would talk about the challenges involved as an ancillary. See, this is not a core part, but you can talk about various types of tourism by hub and spoke model, right? Just try to draw it over there itself, and then talk about the way forward, and then you talk about the conclusion. That is how you will write the answer. So please do write, very, very important, and really feel so good that so many of you have been writing. And yes, if you like the initiative, do not forget to press the like button, and also let us know in the comment. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about the release of the draft National Health Research Policy 2026 by the Department of Health Research. Now, this calls for a robust, inclusive, and innovation-driven health research ecosystem. Very, very important component of health, of social issues in GS2. And this is for the very first time that Department of Health Research has come up with such a framework, a unified framework for the health research in the country. The Department of Health Research, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, has released the draft National Health Research Policy and has called for public consultation, the views of the people. It is India's first comprehensive national policy aimed at creating a unified framework for health research. See, if you look at the health research paradigm in India, it's very much fragmented in nature. We have multiple institutions, but there is lack of coordination. And the policy objectives are not aligned to the ground realities. They're not aligned to the needs of the people as such. It is more of a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. And therefore, specifically in a country like India, which is witnessing a huge transition as far as the overall disease burden is concerned, as far as the nature of the disease is concerned, this is very, very important, because what we are observing is a growth in the non-communicable disease, right? And more people are dying because of the non-communicable disease. You talk about the cardiovascular diseases, you talk about the brain stroke, you talk about the diabetes or the other diseases. So therefore, there has to be a policy shift, and this policy is, again, the coming of the draft is a very, very important step. Aligning the scientific research with the country's disease burden, public health priorities and healthcare needs. So we need to align or have a kind of a framework with respect to the health research in line with the disease burden of the country, in line with the public health priorities, in line with the needs of the people as such, specifically the marginalized and the vulnerable sections of society who cannot access or who do not have the adequate money to access various health services. Now, what is the draft National Health Policy of 2026? The policy seeks to transform India's health research ecosystem by aligning the research priorities with India's disease burden and emerging health challenges. As I already told, that the burden of the non-communicable diseases is increasing in terms of diabetes, in terms of cardiovascular diseases, in terms of the pulmonary diseases. So therefore, and what it is leading to is almost 2/3 of the deaths in India, they are attributed to the non-communicable diseases. In 1990s, the major challenge was with respect to the communicable diseases, for example, tuberculosis. Now, the burden has shifted to non-communicable disease. That does not mean that we don't have the communicable diseases, or the intensity or the frequency or the numbers of communicable diseases have reduced. No, not at all. It has definitely improved, but the number of people suffering with respect to the non-communicable disease has increased, and primarily this is because of the lifestyle, primarily because of the food intake, primarily because of the pollution, right? Promoting the indigenous innovation and self-reliance in medical research. Right now, we are more of, I'm not saying that we have not done any kind of research, but specifically for those highly complex things, we are still dependent on the imported technologies in the health research. So we need to indigenize the systems. Then we have bridging the gap between the scientific research and healthcare delivery. This is very, very important. Most of the healthcare research in India, most of it, is basically right now, whatever research has happened, the scientific research in the medical line, in the medical field, it is now confined to the journals and the laboratories. We have not been able to basically transition that or transform that into the real world because of various hurdles involved. Lack of capital, lack of commercialization, and the other things. So this is a time where, specifically in a country like India, where most of the people are from the low socio-economic strata, we need to come up with the affordable products, right? Health products. Strengthening the evidence-based policymaking. Over here, the indigenous innovation, the examples can be the vaccines, the medicines, the active pharmaceutical ingredients. As of now, we are greatly or hugely dependent on Chinese imports as far as APIs are concerned. Strengthen the evidence-based policymaking. That is on the basis of what the people need. The policy making should be on the basis of what the real circumstances are, what the real data says on that basis, right? It should not be a top-down approach. Building a coordinated, accountable and outcome-oriented research ecosystem, which is transparent, which is accountable, right? Now, why is a policy needed? Several structural weaknesses in India's existing health research ecosystem, and because of that, we have this particular policy. Fragmented research ecosystem. Right now, as I told you, the research, it is currently conducted by multiple institutions. Let's talk about the ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, or let's talk about the medical colleges in the country, or let's talk about various private hospitals, right? Or let's talk about the specific institutions. So there are many institutions, but there is lack of coordination. And if there is lack of coordination, there can be the duplication of effort. I'm also working on that particular thing, you're also working on that. And both are basically consuming the resources. So rather, there has to be adequate coordination. There are multiple agencies, but lack of coordination. Mismatch between research and disease burden. Right now, the kind of research we are having, it is not aligned with the emerging disease patterns. The research is basically taking place from a perspective of top-down approach, not a bottom-up approach. Got it? Pandemics or equity. In a sense of, are we focusing more on, for example, the neglected diseases, neglected tropical diseases, for example? Are we focusing more on the needs of the poor people? Or rather, it's just the focus on the specific diseases? who like for which only the rich class can only afford, right? Then we have regional imbalance. The research infrastructure is primarily concentrated in only few states. But what about the aspirational districts or the northeastern states or the tribal areas? They are not having adequate facilities. So the positive ripple effects would not be there. Okay? Weak translation of research into policy. There is slow clinical adoption of whatever research happens. Why? Because of various hurdles, regulatory hurdles, clearances, clinical clearances, right? Minimal healthcare outcomes. And ultimately, if not able to transition or transform the research into a particular product, so there would not be any change, no significant change. How would you have the improvement? Then administrative and regulatory delays, research is delayed, multiple approvals, ethical clearances. So this creates a burden. This creates a delay, right? What are the key provisions of the draft policy? National priority-based research agenda. That right now, from now onwards, we'll focus on having a kind of research which is based on the disease burden of the people. Disease burden in the country itself, on the equity aspect, pandemic preparedness, and this would call for participatory and need-based approach. Need-based approach according to the need of the people. Participatory, why? Because we will also give importance to the states, to the UTs, to the private players. Okay. Then three-tier governance structure. So we'll have the top, the National Health Research Stewardship Committee for the overall policy formulation, for the overall leadership. And then we'll have the Department of Health Research for the execution of it, for the implementation of it, for the funding coordination. Then we have Indian Council of Medical Research, which would act as the top technical and scientific body, which would basically have the knowledge creation. Got it? What would be the role of state? This would focus on local research capacity, coming up with more and more institutions, local institutions. So the states are also expected to invest in as far as the research, the medical research is concerned. Then focus on ethics and research integrity. Whatever research should happen, especially with respect to the clinical trials or the genomics or the DNA or the other specific things, it needs to be ethical. It needs to be scientific. There has to be scientific integrity involved. It has to be accountable. It has to be transparent. So all these principles need to be incorporated. Data governance and cybersecurity, as we are witnessing an exponential growth in the digital aspect. So therefore, it becomes really important to come up with robust frameworks which deal with the data privacy and security aspect. For example, we have also the DPDP Act, Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. So it is in line with that. Then community participation. So we'll have now more of participation of the civil society, the local people, through in the research process itself. By having, again, the policy has been called, or the public, it has been in the public domain for the consultation aspect. So this also talks about the civil society, incorporation of the views of civil society, the local people, people-centric and socially relevant research. Very important for a country like India. Socially relevant research, use in your answers, very important word. That according to the disease profile, according to the burden of disease which people have, which people suffer from, according to that, the research should basically happen. Long-term national targets will come up with measurable outcomes in terms of the overall investment in the research, the number of PhD in the medical research, the publications, the patents, the innovation, commercialization of the products. What are the challenges? Limited research funding. See, even though this is a policy, right? Policy requires the money. It requires money. But we have low funding. See, that has been the problem with India. We have come up with some of the best plans, and that is also some of the problem. That is also one of the greatest problems which the aspirants suffer from, because they basically make very beautiful plans with different colored sketch pens. Day 1, day 2, day 3. In fact, many of the industry, in the industry, there are many of the teachers who are coming up with a plan-wise target. But the point is how much importance you're giving to the execution. You might come up with very good plans, but the execution would require effort. And in this case, it would require money. So that is something we shall have to focus on. Still, there is a low proportion, low investment as a proportion of the GDP compared to the other economies, compared to China or Thailand or Turkey. Human resource constraints, we have very few of epidemiologists. The study of the transmission of disease, epidemiology, right? We have very of the less medical research professionals, public health experts, because most of them who basically do a research, they basically go to other countries because they have better incentives over there. Okay. Then research, regional capacity gaps. We have less of medical colleges in the Northeast, for example. And even where we have these medical colleges in the states at the regional level, they are devoid of the labs and the faculty. There are issues. Then weak industry academia collaboration. If you will not have a proper collaboration between the industry and the academia, what would happen is that the research would be confined to the journals. How would you commercialize it? How would you basically make that idea to turn into a product? For that, you need more of active collaboration. Then regulatory delays, multiple approvals and overlapping regulations, data privacy concerns, exponential expansion of digital health. We have, for example, ABHA, Ayushman Bharat Digital Health Card. We have the various schemes, and this raises a concerns with respect to the data privacy and security. Now, what should be the way forward? Establish a mission-driven research ecosystem. This is very important. So you have come up with a draft policy. Once you come up with a final policy, set up a mission for the overall development as far as research is concerned. Increase public and private investment. We can go with the PPPs, public-private partnerships. See, government cannot do everything. So why not incorporate or involve the private players? Then strengthen the research infrastructure, especially in the underserved areas, in the tribal areas, or in the northeastern states, or in the eastern part of the country. Okay. Then stronger collaboration with academia, hospitals, industry and government. More of collaboration. Then we have regulatory approvals. It should be digital, time-bound process. Because if it is not time-bound, it would take years. And then obviously it would be of no value. Research capacity, we need to focus on the fellowships. There are many people, deserving people who have the adequate talent, but they don't have the adequate money with them, right? So why not provide the fellowships, the doctoral programs, transparent monitoring framework, and the measurable indicators with respect to the research outcomes, with respect to the overall investment in the sector. So if we adopt these parameters, these measurable indicators, we can basically have a proper analysis of what all progress we have had in the last 10 years. So this is again a very good step as far as the health research, the medical research in the country is concerned, but we would basically also need the adequate funding. We would need that political will. We would basically we would need to come up with more of a proper, a planning structure, a proper framework with respect to implementation of this particular policy, right? Let's have a mains practice question, just a 10 marker. The draft National Health Research Policy seeks to align scientific research with India's disease burden and public health priorities, discuss its key features and analyze how it can strengthen India's healthcare system. Very, very important, 10 marks, 150 words, do write, because answer writing, it is indispensable, non-negotiable. You should do it and you will do it. Chalo, let's go to the mains value addition part. Now coming to the mains value addition part, we have two items over here. The very first deals with the Bharat Tex 2026, which in one way or the other is trying to give a boost to the overall textile sector. It's India's flagship global textile and apparel exhibition aimed at promoting the investment, exports, innovation and global value chain integration in the textile sector. It is being held in New Delhi, and it has features more than 1,600 plus exhibitors and the other players, supported by 8 sponsor states including Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Why? Because if there's a question with respect to textiles, if there's a question with respect to the allied sectors, with respect to agriculture, then definitely you can mention this. You can mention this as a kind of a government intervention, government policy with respect to promotion of this particular sector. Significance, what would be the significance? Strengthens India's position as a global textile sourcing and manufacturing hub, facilitates the business-to-business partnerships, foreign direct investments, technology transfer and market access, support the government's vision from farm to fiber to factory to fashion to foreign markets. Very, very important with respect to textile. Do mention in the answers. Promotes MSMEs, technical textiles. For example, we have geotextiles. We have the items which are used in the hospitals, right? The linen, right? Sustainable manufacturing and value-added exports. Enhances the integration with global value chains and complements India's FTA strategy, the free trade agreement strategy. Then we also have some other related government initiatives in terms of PM Mitra Park scheme, production-linked incentive schemes for textiles, National Technical Textile Mission, and Samarth scheme for the skill development in textiles. Next article is with respect to India's import dependency on Chinese products. Very, very important. It says, the article says that India-China bilateral trade reached 91.72 billion US dollars in the first half of 2026, a 23.6% year-on increase, indicating strong trade interdependence. Primarily dependence. Imports from China surged 21.8% to a record of 79.41 billion, while India's exports grew at 37.2% to 12.31 billion. Can you just see the difference? that how much of the items we are importing and how much we are exporting. There's a great difference. Trade deficit with China widened to almost 67.1 billion US dollars in the very first half of 26, likely to surpass the record of 116.12 US billion dollars in 2025. So we'll have a trade deficit. The trade deficit is going to be more than 116.12 US billion dollars for this particular financial year. So there is a great dependency on China. What are the key concerns? The concern is not merely the size of the deficit, but its composition. We are dependent on some of the very, very important strategic items, electronics and the other things, capital goods, electronics, machinery, intermediate inputs that are critical for domestic manufacturing and exports, reflecting continued dependence on Chinese supply chains. We are having PLI, we are having other schemes, but it is still not able to transition into domestic manufacturing aspect. Conversely, India's exports remain concentrated in low value added products. Whatever we are exporting, it is low value added, not that of Chinese, which are basically adding a lot of value to it, such as organic chemicals, ores, seafood, limiting the value capture. What should be the way forward? Diversify the export basket by promoting high value sectors, including pharmaceuticals. So we have a dependency on the APIs. Why can't we manufacture the APIs in India itself? Right? Engineering goods, electronics, chemicals and services. Strengthen the PLI scheme, broaden it or add other sectors to it. Okay? Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat to reduce the imports dependence and deepen the domestic manufacturing. Enhance the market access for Indian products in China. We need to basically have this conversation with the Chinese authorities that Indian products should also be allowed to basically be sold in the Chinese markets, but because Chinese have a lot of restrictions imposed through the removal of non-tariff barriers in the sense of the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, the technical barriers to trade, TBT. Integrate the Indian firms into global value chains and boost the competitiveness through technology, innovation and logistics reforms. So this is which can be used in your mains answer. Let's go to the prelims pointers. Coming to the prelims pointer section, we have the very first topic which talks about trial in absentia. Now see, what we have been witnessing in the UPSC prelims is many of the questions are coming from criminal justice system. Right, for example, the zero FIR question. So therefore, it becomes really very important. Previously, the examiner or the UPSC was restricted with respect to the constitutional aspect or the governance aspect. Now it is asking question with respect to CJS, criminal justice system. So let's study what this particular thing is. A non-bailable warrant has been issued against Hafiz Saeed, right? And we'll see what is this trial in absentia. A special National Investigation Authority court in Jammu has issued a non-bailable warrant against Hafiz Saeed, the chief of the band Lashkar-e-Taiba, in connection with the Pahalgam terror attack. Since Saeed is unlikely to appear before Indian court, the NIA may seek a trial in absentia under section 356 of the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita 2023. So obviously, this coward would not come to India, right? He would stay over there in his hole over there. So we need to have, but the proceedings must be carried on. So therefore, what we'll do is that we will be basically prosecuting or we'll be carrying the processes by using this particular section of 356 of Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, which talks about the trial in absentia. Now, this is a significant provisions introduced under the BNSS, replacing the CRPC of 1973. What are the charges against the coward? The NIA has charged the Hafiz Saeed in his individual capacity as a chief of the band LET and the head of a proxy organization, the Resistance Front. Charges: Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, waging war against India, cross-border criminal conspiracy. What is trial in absentia? A trial in absentia refers to criminal trial conducted without the physical presence of the accused. Section 356 of the BNSS empowers the courts to proceed with the inquiry, trial and judgment if the accused has absconded to evade the trial. There is no immediate possibility of arrest. The accused has been declared a proclaimed offender. This is very important. He or she should be a proclaimed offender. The court treats the accused's continuous absence as a waiver of the right to be present during the trial. The trial would continue, but the person would not be present over there, but the trial would continue. How is BNSS different from the earlier CRPC? Under the CRPC of 73, the CRPC permitted limited proceedings in the absence. For example, we had section 82 subclause 4, proclamation and attachment of property of an absconding accused. Section 299, recording the evidence if the accused had absconded and arrest was unlikely. Section 317, dispensing with the accused person's appearance in limited situations. What was the limitation? The CRPC did not permit a full-fledged trial in absentia. So there were issues with that because whatever sections we have, they are fragmented in nature. They are not composite in nature, right? Resulting in many serious cases remaining pending for years. Changes in the BNSS. The BNSS now expressly permits complete criminal trials in absentia. Over here, only few fragments were provided, only few aspects. But now this is a composite, a comprehensive aspect. Complete criminal trial in absentia in specified cases, ensuring that absconding offenders cannot indefinitely delay the justice process. Who can be tried in absentia? As I told you, that he or she has to be a proclaimed offender under section 84 of the BNSS. That is, the accused must be charged with an offence punishable with imprisonment of 10 years or more, or life imprisonment or death penalty, have been formally declared a proclaimed offender by the court, continue to evade arrest despite legal processes. Therefore, the trial in absentia is restricted to serious criminal offences and cannot be invoked in ordinary cases. This can only be applied, trial in absentia can only be applied if the person is proclaimed offender under section 84 of the BNSS. Okay? And what is the definition of a proclaimed offender? It is given over here. Procedural safeguard under 356. To ensure a fair trial and protect the rights of the accused, the BNSS prescribes several safeguards before commencing a trial in absentia. Before trial, 2 consecutive arrest warrants must be issued with an interval of at least 30 days. Public notice must be published in a local or national newspaper giving the accused 30 days to appear. The notice must be displayed at the accused's last known residence, communicated to a relative or a friend. Waiting period, the trial can begin only after 90 days from the date of framing the charges. Legal representation of the accused has no lawyer. The court must appoint a defense counsel at the state expense to ensure the right to a fair trial. Evidence, the statements of prosecution witness recorded before the trial can be used as evidence. If the accused later appears or is arrested, the court may permit cross-examination of witnesses in the interest of justice. Use of technology, witness examination may be conducted through audio, visual, electronic means. Digital recordings must be preserved to ensure transparency and facilitate the future judicial review. What is the significance? Prevents the absconding offenders from frustrating the criminal justice process, ensures a timely disposal of serious criminal and terrorist related cases, strengthens India's legal response against cross-border terrorism, makes the whole criminal justice system more robust, right, in order to deal with these cowards who are across the borders, right. Balances the need for speedy justice with procedural safeguards ensuring a fair trial. So this can be asked in the prelims. So do remember the important points: 356 and proclaimed offender under section 84. Let's go to the next topic. Now coming to the next topic, we have the India-UK trade deal, which is coming into force or effect from today. India-UK Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, and Double Contribution Convention, DCC. We'll see what this is all about. Can be asked in the prelims. India-UK Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement and the Double Contribution Convention has come into force, making one of India's most comprehensive free trade agreements. So this is a free trade agreement, has elements more than that of a conventional free trade agreement. The key highlights: the comprehensive free trade agreement between India and the UK covers 30 chapters, for example, in goods, services, digital trade, investments, MSMEs, innovation, labor, environment, gender, and other things. It is India's most ambitious, future-oriented FTA, addressing both tariff and non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers, as I told you, for example, we have SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary, and for example, we have the technical non-tariff barriers as technical barriers to trade, right? Tariff liberalization, UK's commitment: immediate tariff elimination on 96.8 of tariff lines. Additional 2% tariff lines to receive quota-based tariff concessions. Overall coverage is important: 98.8 of the tariff lines, 99.5% of trade value. Major beneficiaries with respect to India would be the textiles and the garments, leather products, gems and jewelries, marine products, agriculture products, engineering goods, auto components, and chemicals. India's commitments: immediate tariff elimination on 30.3% of imports from the UK. So we will also have concessions with respect to the UK, the products which are coming from the UK. Additional 47% of tariff lines to be liberalized in phases. Quota-based tariff concessions on 12.1% of trade value on specific quotas. Overall coverage 89% of tariff lines and 89.4% of trade value. Sensitive sectors protected by India. Now this is the story which India has with respect to almost every trade deal, because still what we say is that our domestic industries are not that competitive and our farmers and the other domestic manufacturers need protection. For example, dairy, cereals, pulses, vegetables, gold and jewelry, smartphones. Now this demonstrates India's calibrated approach, liberalization with protection of sensitive domestic sectors, primarily the farmers. Addressing the non-tariff barriers, besides tariff reduction, CETA also seeks to reduce the non-tariff barriers. For example, we have sanitary and phytosanitary measures, ensures food safety and plant or animal health regulations do not become unnecessary trade restrictions. Technical barriers to trade, harmonizes the standard certification and technical regulations to facilitate the smoother trade. Helps the Indian exporters to face the fewer compliance-related hurdles in the UK market. What are the benefits for India? We'll have the duty-free access for nearly all major Indian exports to the UK, would enhance the income of various beneficiaries. For example, we have farmers, fisher folks, MSMEs, textile workers, women entrepreneurs, very important, and skilled professionals. Boost to the services sectors, for example, information technology and information technology enabled services, financial services, professional services, consultancy, fintech, legal and accounting services. We have, for example, many of the chartered accountants, right? Strengthening the global value chains enhances India's integration into the global manufacturing and services value chains. Investment promotion, for example, in the overall FDI, the technological transfer, the innovation partnerships and the infrastructure financing. What is this double contribution convention? The DCC is a social security agreement that prevents double payment of social security contributions by temporary workers. There can be a person who is contributing in the Provident Fund or some particular social security, and then that person goes to the UK, and over there also the person is contributing. So there is a kind of a double contribution which the particular person has been imposed. Indian employees temporarily working in the UK for up to 5 years continue contributing to the India social security system, exempted from paying the national insurance contribution in the UK. Thus, avoid double social security contributions. Covers almost 75,000 of Indian professionals, benefits 900 plus Indian employers, reduces the employment costs, enhances the competitiveness of Indian IT and services companies, facilitates the greater mobility of skilled professionals. More of the skilled professionals from India can basically go to the other countries, go to the UK, right, specifically. Importance for India, the agreement strengthens India's position in services exports, skilled labor mobility, IT sector competitiveness, cross-border employment. What are the challenges? Indian exporters must comply with strict UK quality. Even though we have tried to reduce the burden, but still there are standards. These standards are very tough with respect to importing in the UK. Environmental and labor standards, they give due importance to the labor standards also. Domestic industries may face greater competition in liberalized sectors. Realization of benefits depends on the effective implementation and utilization by the businesses. So let's see what would be the result of it. But again, the provisions are in line with India's needs, and let's see what happens in the future. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about a very toxic herbicide known as Paraquat. Very, very toxic and has claimed the life of many of the farmers also. The central government has notified a ban on Paraquat dichloride, a widely used non-selective contact herbicide, citing serious concerns over human health and safety. The decision follows similar bans in Kerala, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. So again, very, very important news, can be asked in the prelims. This is what the Paraquat dichloride is all about. A highly toxic, non-selective contact herbicide used to control the weeds, commonly sprayed after the harvesting to clear the fields before sowing the next crop. Used in crops such as tea, coffee, rubber, cotton, fruits, and plantations. Why has it been banned? Several health risks are there. Highly poisonous, even in small quantities. No specific antidote exists. So if a person consumes it accidentally, so there is no specific antidote to fight that particular poison. Causes irreversible damage to lungs, pulmonary fibrosis, kidneys, liver, associated with farmer suicides. Many of the people, especially in the central region or in the southern region, they have committed suicide by consuming this particular thing. Accidental poisoning, homicides, occupational exposure among the farm workers. So again, very important, can be asked in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Now coming to the last topic of today's discussion is a mention of Sashastra Seema Bal, which has arrested a suspected US national at the India-Nepal border. So let's talk about this particular paramilitary organization. The Sashastra Seema Bal, previously known as the Special Service Bureau, was established on 15 March 1963 after the Sino-Indian conflict of 62. It was created with the objective of guarding India's international transnational border with Nepal and Bhutan. SSB is a part of Central Armed Police Forces and falls under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Primary responsibility of SSB is to protect the safety of India's designated borders with neighboring nations such as Nepal and Bhutan. These are the states over here. We have Uttarakhand, we have Uttar Pradesh, we have Bihar, we have Sikkim, and we have West Bengal, which share the land border with Nepal. So do remember. To foster an understanding of security among the people, to stop smuggling, illegal immigration, and other transnational crimes, to stop the unlawful entry or exit from or to the border, to implement the social responsibility initiatives in relevant jurisdiction, for instance, establishing school, building, restrooms, and other things, to perform any additional tasks such as the UN missions, law and order missions, counter the uprising operations, election duty, or other things. Headed by the Director General, IPS officer or senior CAPF officer, includes infantry-style battalions, specialized units, for example, the dog squads, and the training centers. So can be asked, do remember, it guards the border of Bhutan and also Nepal. Both these countries, not just Nepal, but also Bhutan. Remember this. Here we come at the end of the discussion. I hope you really enjoyed it. All the best. And again, a reminder, do write the answer because that is the only alternative. That is the only solution you have. My best wishes to all of you. Take care of yourself.